My name is Ethan Rourke, and security dragged me out of a Ford factory while my daughter's name was still glowing on the finalist screen behind me. Mia was 10 years old, standing beside the little robot she built from saved-up parts, waiting for the scholarship round that could change her life. Then Darren Pike, a senior Ford executive, saw my last name and told security my family had a history of factory disruption. They searched my pockets in front of everyone. One guard grabbed my wrist and saw my father's cracked old work watch. Darren smiled and said it was stolen company property, left over from the 1998 shutdown my father supposedly caused. Mia whispered, "It was Grandpa's." Darren looked down at her and said, "That family always had trouble knowing what belonged to Ford." I was pushed toward the exit while my daughter's robot sat alone on stage. Miranda Keane, the billionaire CEO visiting for the event, told them, "Keep the event clean." But as the door shut, she saw the watch on my wrist and froze like she had just seen a ghost. The ending of this story changed everything. Before we get there, take a quick second to join the community by hitting subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. The first time security put their hands on me inside that Ford factory, my daughter's name was still glowing on the finalist screen behind them. Blue Line Innovation Day had turned the assembly floor into something that looked more like a TV studio than a place where people built cars. There were banners hanging from the rafters, cameras on rolling tripods, executives with visitor badges clipped to suit jackets, and parents standing beside student robotics projects like they were guarding college acceptance letters. I stood near Mia's little display table in my one clean button-down shirt, feeling every scuff on my boots against that polished concrete. Mia kept squeezing my hand, not because she was scared at first, but because she was trying not to bounce on her toes. Her robot sat on the stage with a blue number card beside it, and above us the screen read, "Mia Rourke, finalist, future manufacturing scholarship." I had worked maintenance jobs, loading docks, school boilers, anything that paid. But that morning I felt like maybe my daughter had stepped into a room our family name had never been allowed to enter. Then Darren Pike saw my badge. I knew his face before I knew his name because men like him do not walk through factories, they inspect them. Gray suit, silver hair, clean smile, eyes that never landed on anybody's hands. He looked at my visitor tag, then at Mia's finalist card, and something changed in his expression. He leaned toward a security supervisor and said something too low for me to hear, but I caught two words because I had been hearing them since I was 12. Rourke family. The guard came over polite at first, asking me to step aside for a routine check. I said, "Is something wrong?" And Mia's fingers tightened around mine. They checked my pockets right there beside her project table, then my lunch bag. A turkey sandwich wrapped in foil, an apple Mia had packed for me, 2 socket wrenches I had forgotten were in the side pocket from fixing a sink at school. People started looking. A boy from another robotics team whispered. One of the parents turned her phone toward us, not all the way up, just enough to record while pretending she wasn't. A guard grabbed my wrist when I reached for my lunch bag, and my sleeve pulled back. My father's old work watch showed under the cuff. Cracked glass, dull steel, stopped hands that had never moved no matter how many times I wound it as a kid. Darren stepped closer, like he had been waiting for that exact moment. "That watch belongs to Ford property," he said, loud enough for the closest cameras to catch. "Old tool room item, connected to the 1998 disruption." Mia's face went white. "It was my grandpa's," she whispered. Darren looked down at her and smiled, the way grown men smile when they know a child cannot fight back. "That family always had trouble knowing what belonged to Ford." I felt something hot climb up my throat, but I swallowed it because Mia was watching my hands. I said, "Take your hand off me. My daughter is presenting." Security did the opposite. They moved me toward the exit while Mia's robot sat alone on that stage, and her name still shone above us like the room had not already decided she did not belong there. That was when Miranda Keane arrived with press and investors around her, all bright flashes and expensive calm. She was younger than I expected, sharp in a white blazer, walking like the event had been built to wait for her. She saw security pulling me past the finalist tables, saw Mia standing there with both hands pressed to her stomach, and her face did not soften. "Keep the event clean," she said, barely slowing down. Not, "What happened?" Not, "Is the child okay?" Just that. Clean. Like I was a spill on the floor. The guard shoved the door open with his shoulder and pushed me through into the cold air outside the visitor gate. I turned back once, fighting to see Mia through the glass, and that was when Miranda's eyes dropped to my wrist. She stopped so suddenly that people behind her almost ran into her. Her face changed. Not enough for the crowd, maybe, but enough for me to see it through the glass. She was staring at my father's cracked watch like it had reached out of the past and touched her. Then the door shut between us, and my daughter's name disappeared from the screen. The cold hit me first when they shoved me outside the visitor gate. Inside, through the glass, I could still see Mia standing beside her teacher with her hands folded in front of her robot like she was waiting for someone to tell her she still belonged there. I slapped my palm once against the door and said, "My daughter's inside." The guard planted himself in front of me and said if I touched the door again, he would call Dearborn police. Behind him, Miranda Keane had turned toward Darren Pike, her eyes still flicking once toward my wrist. I could not hear every word through the glass, but I heard enough. Darren said my father's name like it was dirt. Frank Rourke. Unstable. Reckless. Responsible for the 1998 press line incident. Injured workers. Millions lost. Then he pointed toward my watch and said Frank had stolen it from the old tool room before the shutdown. I watched Mia look at the stage, then at the kids whispering near the finalist tables. One boy leaned close to another and both of them stared at her badge. Her teacher touched her shoulder, trying to guide her forward for her turn, but Mia shook her head. She stepped away from the stage before they even called her name. Her little robot stayed behind under the lights, all wires and careful work, abandoned because a room full of adults had made her feel smaller than something she built with her own hands. I shouted her name, but the glass swallowed most of it. When she finally looked toward me, I dropped to one knee outside the fence so my face was level with hers. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said through the metal. She put her fingers against the fence, and I pressed mine to the other side like that was the closest I was allowed to be to my own child. Miranda saw it. I know she did. She stood there with cameras waiting, investors watching, and a schedule printed in some folder worth more than my rent. For half a second, I thought she might stop the whole thing. Instead, she turned back toward the stage. Darren leaned to someone with a headset, and a minute later Mia's name disappeared from the finalist screen. "Until eligibility is verified," I heard a staffer say. When they finally brought Mia out, she walked like she was trying not to cry in front of strangers. In the car, she stared at her lap and asked, "Is Rourke why people think we steal things?" I gripped the wheel so hard my cracked watch dug into my skin. Back inside, Miranda quietly told her assistant, "Find me the old photograph with that watch." By morning, the clip had gone everywhere. It showed security pulling me through the Ford factory doors while I twisted back toward Mia, but it did not show Darren calling my father reckless. It did not show Mia's name being wiped off the finalist screen. It did not show my daughter walking away from the stage before her turn because grown people had made her last name feel dirty. The caption said I had used my child's robotics contest to sneak into a factory event and confront a CEO for attention. By breakfast, strangers had already decided I was exactly what Darren needed me to be. My phone started ringing before Mia came out of her room. The school district called first. I had fixed their boilers, patched ceiling leaks, salted sidewalks before sunrise, but the woman from HR spoke like I had become a stain they needed removed before donors noticed. "Pending review," she said. "Temporary suspension." I looked at my maintenance keys on the counter and knew temporary was just a polite word people use before they lock you out. Then Mia's robotics teacher called, voice low, almost whispering. Her scholarship application was frozen until the committee reviewed eligibility. She told me she had been instructed not to discuss the incident. I thanked her because she sounded ashamed, and I did not want to make her carry more than she already was. By noon, the landlord had seen the video too. He said he hated to bring it up, but public legal trouble could complicate the lease renewal. Mia heard enough from the hallway. That afternoon, she took off her robotics team shirt and folded it so carefully it hurt to watch. Later, when I went to check on her, I found her finalist certificate hidden under her mattress, still in the plastic sleeve, like proof of something good had become dangerous. Darren called after dinner. No greeting, just business. He said the investigation could stop if I signed a statement admitting the watch had been taken from Ford property years ago. Your daughter's scholarship might still be saved, he said. Act like a father instead of a martyr. I looked at Mia's closed bedroom door and thought about rent, work, and the certificate under her mattress. Then I said, a father doesn't teach his child to survive by helping a lie breathe. Darren went quiet for 1 second. Then we'll handle it legally, he said, and hung up. I went back to the factory administration office the next morning because I wanted 2 things in writing: the full security footage released and Mia's finalist status restored. The woman at reception took my name, looked at her screen, and stopped typing for half a second. Then she told me to wait beneath a wall display titled Ford Safety Heroes Through the Years. There were framed photos of supervisors, engineers, executives, men shaking hands beside clean machines, men wearing hard hats that had probably never seen dust. I read every little brass nameplate while my hands stayed in my jacket pockets. Frank Rourke was not there. My father's hands had come home burned from that place, but his name had been scrubbed off the wall like he had never warned anybody, never worked overtime, never missed my ball games because a press line needed him more than I did. Darren Pike came out alone and led me into a small conference room with no windows. He did not offer coffee. He set a folder on the table like a preacher laying down a Bible. You keep pushing this, Ethan, and your daughter pays for it, he said. Your father was officially responsible for the 1998 shutdown. That's not gossip, that's record. I had grown up under that record. Neighbors stopped talking when Frank walked into the grocery store. Men on our street said he cost them overtime, cost the plant millions, got good workers hurt, broke the line because he panicked. I remembered him coming home the night after it happened with both hands wrapped in white gauze, sitting at our kitchen table while my mother cried into a dish towel. I asked him what happened. He just looked at the settlement papers and said, "Some stories come with locks on them, son." After that, he never wore short sleeves again. Darren leaned back and smiled. Your father's story died because nobody trusts a man who panics under pressure. I stared past him because if I looked at his mouth any longer, I was going to say something that would help him. On the hallway wall outside the room, half hidden behind a potted plant, was an old photo from the 1998 incident display. Miranda Keane was in it as a toddler, held against her mother's coat outside the factory gates. At the edge of the frame, only a worker's arm showed, but I saw the wrist. Cracked steel watch. Same square face. Same dead hands. Darren followed my eyes, and his smile vanished. He stepped out, pulled the photo from the wall, and tucked it under his arm like it had started burning him. That was when I understood. The watch was not dangerous because it was stolen. It was dangerous because it proved my father had been there saving someone they needed the world to forget. Lou Alvarez followed me out before I reached the parking lot. I knew him by face more than by friendship, an old union safety steward with a bad hip and a voice like gravel in a coffee can. He waited until the glass doors shut behind us, then looked back at the administration building like it still had ears. Frank didn't steal that watch, he said. I stopped with my keys in my hand. Lou pointed at my wrist. Toolroom crew gave it to him, after he pulled 3 men out of Press Bay 4. He said it fast, like if he slowed down, shame might catch him. Your father earned that thing with smoke in his lungs. I did not move. For 20 years, people had talked about that watch like it was proof my father took something on his way out. Lou rubbed his thumb over the top of his cane and kept going. The crystal cracked because Frank hit the emergency stop panel with a wrench. Panel was dead. Management had it bypassed during a production push because the line kept tripping. He swallowed and looked toward the factory stacks. That press should have been stopped hours before. Frank didn't break the line, Ethan. He found out it was already broken. The words landed in places I had kept boarded up since I was a kid. I saw my father at our kitchen table again, hands wrapped white, jaw tight, letting the whole neighborhood call him reckless because a signed settlement had locked his mouth shut.
"Why didn't you say that?" I asked him.
It came out low, but Lou flinched anyway. "My pension," he said. "Rosa's medical coverage. She was on oxygen by then. Darren's people made it real clear what talking would cost." I wanted to hate him cleanly, but nothing about him looked clean. He looked like a man who had been carrying one bad choice so long it had bent his spine. Still, anger moved through me before pity could. "My daughter got dragged into this yesterday," I said. "My father died with people spitting on his name. Your pension bought a lot of silence." Lou nodded once, eyes on the pavement. Then he reached inside his coat and handed me a folded yellow paper. It was an old Union safety note, soft at the creases, with my father's name written beside a report time. "Press Bay 4, emergency stop non-responsive. Reported before incident." My hand shook before I could stop it, but the note skipped from page 1 to page 4. The middle was gone. Lou said those pages disappeared during the company investigation, same as half the men's statements. Then he leaned closer. "The old tool room still has analog maintenance boards. Grease pencil, punch tags, shift markers. They never digitized all of it. If Frank left a trail, it's in there." I looked back at the factory, at the new construction banners for the robotics expansion hanging over the loading doors. Lou followed my eyes. "They're clearing that room tomorrow," he said. I folded the note and put it inside my jacket next to my heart, where the watch kept pressing against my wrist. Darren had already erased my father once. I was not going to let him send the last proof into a dumpster. When I got home, Mia was sitting at the kitchen table with my old laptop open, typing with 2 fingers and stopping every few words to erase. Her robotics shirt was folded beside her, not worn, folded like she had already said goodbye to it. I looked over her shoulder and saw the first line. "Dear Scholarship Committee, I am sorry for what happened at the Ford event." My chest went tight, but I kept my voice even. "Mia, close it." She shook her head without looking up. "I embarrassed the school, Dad." I pulled out the chair beside her. "No, adults embarrass themselves around you." She wiped under one eye with the heel of her hand and said, "Kids from troubled families have to be extra polite. If we're not, people get scared." Before I could answer that in a way worthy of her, my phone buzzed. The school district had turned my suspension into termination after receiving a formal warning from Darren Pike's office about security misconduct. 10 minutes later, the landlord knocked and handed me a notice giving us 15 days to settle overdue rent or move out. He would not look at Mia when he said it. After he left, she went to her room and came back carrying her robotics kit, the one we had built up one birthday at a time. Motors, wires, sensors, little wheels in plastic drawers. She set it on the table like a sacrifice. "We can sell it," she said. "I can build stuff from cardboard again." I had to turn toward the sink and run water over a clean cup just so she would not see my hands. Then Darren texted me. No greeting, no signature. Just a photo of Mia leaving school, her backpack hanging off one shoulder, with one sentence under it. "Stop digging before your daughter loses more than a contest." I stood there with the phone in my hand until the screen went dark. For the first time, this was not just about my father's name. Darren had reached into my child's ordinary day and put his hand around it. I opened a browser and searched for lawyers, clicked one number, then saw the consultation fee and closed the laptop. We were already counting quarters for laundry. Justice had a front desk, and I could not afford the waiting room. Later that evening, Miranda Keane's assistant called and said Ms. Keane wanted to inspect the watch privately. I said no. She can see it when Mia's name is restored publicly, I told her. Not in some conference room where rich people decide what truth is worth. After I hung up, Lou called from a payphone near the plant. They were clearing the old tool room at dawn. I looked at Mia's robotics kit still sitting on the table, then at my father's cracked watch on my wrist. Going in could get me arrested. It could give Darren exactly what he needed to call me unfit. But if I stayed home, he would erase Frank for good, and Mia would learn that men like him only have to threaten a child to make the truth behave. I told Lou, I'll be there before sunrise. Miranda Keane came to my apartment after dark, and even without cameras behind her, she still looked like someone expecting the world to move out of her way. Her black SUV sat at the curb with the engine running. She stood on my second-floor landing in a wool coat, eyes moving once over the peeling paint, the crooked porch light, the grocery bag I had not carried inside yet. "Mr. Rourke," she said, like we were in a boardroom and not outside a door with a bad lock. "I need to inspect the watch. I may be able to resolve this misunderstanding." I kept one hand on the door frame and did not step aside. "The first misunderstanding," I said, "was letting my daughter get treated like a criminal in front of her peers." Miranda's face tightened, but she did not argue. Through the open door, Mia's robotics kit sat boxed on the kitchen table, each plastic drawer labeled in her careful handwriting. Wheels, sensors, tiny motors, the soldering iron I had saved 3 months to buy. Miranda looked at the box, then at the handwritten "for sale" note Mia had taped to the lid. For the first time, she seemed to understand the event had not ended at the factory gate. It had followed my child home and started packing up her future. Miranda lowered her voice. "My mother kept a photograph in her dresser," she said. "A worker's wrist was in the edge of it. Same watch. She would look at it and cry, but she never told me why." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. "Rich families call pain a mystery," I said. "Poor families call it rent, work, and silence." She looked down at my wrist then, at the cracked face of Frank's watch, like it was no longer an object she could request. It was something that had survived people trying to name it stolen. She reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. "Let me cover your rent while I verify the records." I did not touch it. "Money without public truth teaches Mia shame can be bought," I said. "Restore her name first, then ask to see what my father left me." Miranda stood there another second with the envelope in her hand, unused to being refused by someone who needed exactly what she was offering. Then she turned and walked back down the stairs slower than she had climbed them. From the window, I watched her get into the SUV and make a call before the door even shut. "Pull every internal file connected to Frank Rourke, the watch, and the 1998 Pressline incident," she said. By midnight, Lou called me. His voice was tight. "Darren knows she's looking. They moved the tool room clearance to first thing tomorrow." Lou got us in before dawn through a loading corridor behind the stamping wing, the kind of door nobody remembered until an old worker touched the right latch. The factory was not awake yet, but it was not sleeping either. Pipes ticked overhead. A forklift beeped somewhere far off. The old tool room sat behind a chain-link partition, half cleared already, like someone had started erasing it in a hurry and planned to finish before daylight. Pegboards hung empty in pale rectangles where tools had been. Time clocks leaned against the wall with their cords cut. Yellowed safety charts curled at the corners. Lockers stood in 2 rows, names scratched into metal by men who probably thought somebody would remember them longer than the company did. Frank's locker was number 38. I knew that because my mother used to write it on envelopes when she packed him tax forms, union notices, anything he forgot at home. The nameplate was gone, scraped clean, but the inside still smelled like old grease and dust. I ran my fingers along the back panel and felt one uneven mark.
Lou held his flashlight close. There, scratched in pencil, so faint I almost missed it, were the words, 314. Stop was already dead. My father's handwriting leaned the same way mine did when I was tired. Lou let out a breath. 314 was when Frank reported the emergency stop was disabled, he said. Official report says the incident began at 3:22. 8 minutes. That was all it took to turn a warning into a crime. If they moved the start time, then Frank did not cause the shutdown. He tried to stop what was already coming.
I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but the tool room lights snapped on. Darren Pike stood at the entrance with security and 2 men in contractor vests. "Trespassing and planting evidence," he said, like he had rehearsed it. One guard grabbed my wrist before I got the shot. Darren pointed at the locker. "Remove that panel. Disposal bin." Lou stepped forward, but security pushed him back. Then Miranda's voice cut across the room. "Nobody touches it." She came in still wearing last night's clothes, hair pulled back fast, eyes on the pencil mark. For 1 second I thought she would say it out loud, that Ford had lied. But she only said, "Preserve the panel until we verify it." Darren smiled because hesitation still protected him. As security pulled me away from the locker, my eyes caught a faded maintenance board near the back wall. One missing shift log number was circled in grease pencil. Beside it was a time, 3:14. The same time frozen forever on my father's cracked watch. I did not understand the watch until I sat in my truck outside the factory and held it under the dome light. I had worn it for years because it was the only thing of my father's that nobody had taken from us. But I had never really looked at what it was trying to say. The hands were frozen at 3:14. Not 3:22, the time printed in every official report. Not the time Darren kept repeating like a hymn. 3:14. The same time on Frank's locker. The same time on the faded maintenance board. 8 minutes before the lie began. Lou sat beside me with both hands wrapped around his cane. "That's when he hit the panel," he said. "Emergency stop was dead. Your dad smashed it with a wrench, cracked the watch when the glass hit metal, then ran into Press Bay 4 and started dragging people out." He looked out at the factory lights. Flash came after, smoke after, screaming after. But Frank knew before. That's what they had to bury. I touched the cracked face with my thumb and remembered my father at our kitchen table, hands wrapped, letting me believe silence was weakness when maybe silence was the only way he kept our roof from collapsing. Miranda called an hour later and asked me to meet her in a conference room near the visitor center. She had her mother's old photograph laid flat on the table. In it, a young woman sat wrapped in a blanket outside the factory gates, face streaked with smoke, one arm held by a worker cropped halfway out of the frame. Miranda put my father's watch beside the photo and turned it so the cracked, square face matched the wrist in the picture. Her mouth opened, but no words came at first. Then she whispered, "He was holding my mother." She sat down hard, like her knees had stopped trusting her. "My company let him die blamed for this." Darren did not let the moment breathe. He walked in with a digital incident report printed clean and white. "Frank Rourke bypassed safety procedure at 3:22, he said. "That is the record." I looked at the perfect pages in his hand, and then at my father's cracked watch. "Clean records are easy," I said, "when the dirty ones are thrown away." That night, Mia heard a news anchor call Frank the man whose grandson is reopening old factory trauma. She muted the TV and asked, "Dad, is truth worth it if everyone we love keeps getting hurt?" I had no answer. Then my phone rang. Miranda's voice was thin. "I found someone from Press Bay 4 who is still alive." Miranda drove me to a nursing facility outside Ann Arbor where the halls smelled like lemon cleaner and warm laundry. Her mother, Caroline Keane, lived in a quiet room with family photos lined along the windowsill, but Miranda warned me before we went in that some days her mother remembered 1968 better than breakfast. Caroline was sitting in a chair by the window, thin hands folded over a blanket, staring at birds on the feeder. Miranda touched her shoulder and said, "Mom, this is Ethan Rourke." Caroline looked at me politely, empty of recognition, until her eyes dropped to my wrist. The change was immediate. Her mouth trembled. She reached out before anyone explained and touched my father's cracked watch with 2 fingers. Then she started crying like the room had opened under her. Miranda knelt beside her chair. "Mom?" Caroline did not look at her. She kept staring at the watch. "He told me to listen to the ticking," she whispered. "Smoke everywhere. My ears hurt. I couldn't breathe." Her fingers tightened around my wrist, gentle but desperate. "His hands were burned. He carried me. I kept screaming and he put the watch in my palm and said, 'Count the ticks, ma'am. Stay with the ticks.'" My throat closed around my father's name. Caroline's eyes moved to mine, and for one clear second she was not lost in age or illness. "Frank," she said. "That was his name. Frank Rourke." Miranda sat back on her heels like someone had taken the floor away. Caroline had been pregnant during the incident. Everybody knew that from old articles. What nobody had said, what nobody had allowed into the record, was that my father had carried her through smoke. If Frank had not gone into that bay, Miranda Keane might never have been born. Caroline closed her eyes and whispered one more thing. "Tell them the stop was dead before the line moved." Miranda stood up fast, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "We go public today," she said. I shook my head. "Not with only your mother's memory. Darren will call her confused. He'll use her illness against her the same way he used my father's silence." She looked like she hated that I was right. Before we reached the parking lot, my phone started buzzing. Darren had leaked security footage of me inside the old tool room, cut clean to make it look like I broke in after manipulating Miranda. By evening, Dearborn Police had issued a warrant for trespass and evidence tampering. I looked at the notice on my phone and thought of Mia's bedroom down the hall from mine, her toothbrush by the sink, her robotics kit still boxed on the table. Darren was not just coming for the truth anymore. He was building a case that could make a judge wonder if my daughter was safe with me. Mia's robotics final was reinstated 2 days later, but it did not feel like a victory. It felt like somebody had handed my daughter back something they could still take whenever they wanted. Miranda had pressured the committee, that much I knew, because the email came with too many careful words and not one apology. Mia read it 3 times at the kitchen table, then looked at her boxed-up robotics kit like she was afraid touching it would make it disappear again. I told her we would go, that she deserved her run, her score, her name called without a factory shadow over it. She nodded, but that morning she packed her tools slower than usual, checking every wire twice, folding her team shirt over her arm instead of wearing it until we got inside. The school gym was full when we arrived. Folding chairs, poster boards, parents holding coffee, kids kneeling beside robots on taped lanes. I stayed near the back wall with my hands in my jacket pockets, trying to be nothing but a father watching his child get one clean moment. Mia set her robot on the start mark and glanced back once. I gave her a small nod. Then 2 men in suits walked through the side doors with a uniformed officer behind them. I knew before they said my name. One of Darren's lawyers handed me papers right there in the gym during my daughter's presentation, like cruelty worked better with witnesses. Parents turned. Somebody whispered, "Isn't he under investigation?" Another voice said, "Why is a man like that allowed near children?" Mia heard it. Her robot started forward, made the first turn, then stopped dead in the middle of the lane. She was looking past the judges at the officer beside me. I kept my voice steady because if I let it break, she would break with it. "Mia," I said, "finish the run." She reached for the controller, but her fingers would not settle. A school security guard stepped beside me and said I needed to leave the gym until the matter was handled. "She's 10, I said. "Let me stand here until she finishes." He looked away, which meant no. They escorted me toward the doors while phones came up around the room. Mia's robot sat crooked under the lights, one wheel still twitching, like even the machine knew it had been interrupted by something uglier than failure. Miranda arrived too late. I saw her through the gym doors as they pushed me into the hallway. She stepped inside and stopped when she saw Mia standing alone beside the frozen robot, while parents recorded her instead of helping her. Mia turned on her before anyone could explain. "You people keep saying you're fixing the future," she said, small voice shaking but clear enough for the front rows to hear. "But you keep breaking my dad." Miranda did not answer right away. She looked at the papers in the lawyer's hand, then at my daughter, then at all those phones pointed like little weapons. When she finally spoke, she did it loud enough for the room and cameras. "I am reopening the 1998 press line safety investigation," she said. "Publicly. Independently. Today." The lawyer's face changed first. Then the room did.
Darren's settlement offer came through lawyers, not because he believed in law, but because paper made threats look civilized. We met in a conference room that smelled like coffee nobody drank, with 2 attorneys on his side and 1 legal aid woman on mine, who kept glancing at the clock because she had 3 other families waiting after me. Darren did not sit at first. He stood behind the chair, hands resting on the back of it, like a man offering mercy from a place above me. Rent paid in full, my school job restored, Mia's scholarship guaranteed, the warrant handled quietly. All of it written in clean language that would have put our life back together by Friday. Then his lawyer slid the second document across the table. I had to surrender Frank's watch to Ford Archives and sign a statement agreeing that the 1998 incident had been emotionally misunderstood by surviving family members. Not false, not covered up, misunderstood. Darren finally sat down and looked at me with that soft little smile. "Your daughter deserves stability, Ethan," he said. "More than a dead man deserves a better story." I looked at the numbers on the page, the rent amount, the scholarship confirmation, the job reinstatement letter already drafted. For 1 weak second, I saw Mia sleeping in her own room without boxes stacked by the door. I saw groceries in the fridge. I saw her robot rebuilt, her name clean enough for school hallways. My hand moved toward the pen before I even knew it had moved. The door behind me opened a few inches. Mia must have been sitting outside with the legal aid volunteer, but she had heard enough. She stepped in quietly and placed her robotics medal on the table beside Frank's cracked watch. The metal made a small, cheap sound against the wood. "I want a house," she said, looking at me, not Darren, "but not one built over Grandpa's name." Nobody spoke after that. Darren looked annoyed, like a child had interrupted business. I pushed the papers back across the table. "No," I said. "We'll stay broke before we live inside your lie." Darren's smile disappeared. By evening, his lawyers moved to have me barred from Ford property and pushed the trespass and evidence tampering charges harder. That night, Miranda called. Her voice was low and fast. "Darren signed the original 1998 report," she said. "But Ethan, he didn't have the authority back then." I looked at Frank's watch beside Mia's medal and understood the lie was bigger than Darren. Someone above him had protected it from the start. Miranda called it a safety demonstration, but everybody in that factory knew it was a trial with machines around it. The new robotic line stood behind glass barriers, polished and quiet, while workers, reporters, executives, lawyers, and a few city officials filled the floor. Miranda had reopened the 1998 investigation publicly, but Darren still looked comfortable. Men like him love rooms with microphones and binders. He had digital records on a screen, company lawyers beside him, and enough clean language to make a dead man look guilty all over again. I came in with Mia on one side and Lou on the other. Mia carried her robotics medal in her pocket because she said Grandpa Frank should not stand alone. Lou carried the damaged locker panel wrapped in a moving blanket. I had Frank's cracked watch on my wrist,
Caroline's recorded statement on Miranda's tablet, and the old union safety note folded inside my jacket. Darren looked at all of it and smiled like we had brought garage sale junk to fight a corporation. "The official timeline remains clear," he said to the room. "Frank Rourke bypassed safety procedure at 3:22, causing the shutdown and injuries that followed." I stepped forward before fear could find my mouth. "This watch stopped at 3:14, I said, holding up my wrist. "My father's locker says 3:14, stop was already dead." Lou's union note shows Frank reported the disabled emergency stop before the incident ever began. Lou unfolded the note with hands that shook but did not quit. Miranda played Caroline's recording next. Her mother's voice came through thin and old, but clear enough. She said a worker with burned hands and a cracked watch carried her through smoke and told her the stop was dead before the line moved. The room did not explode. It tightened. People stopped shifting in their chairs. Workers stared at the screen like they were watching 25 years move backward. Then a man near the back raised his hand. He was thin, older, wearing a maintenance jacket with no company logo. "I was told to bypass that stop," he said. "Production was behind. We were told to keep the line moving." Darren snapped, "That man is confused." But the room had already turned. His timeline was falling apart in front of everybody. He tried to blame dead executives, old policies, missing context. Miranda let him talk just long enough. Then she lifted one final page. "This altered report carries your signature," she said. "From before you had authority to sign it." Darren's face went gray, and for the first time, the clean record looked dirty in his own hands. Reporters came at me all at once, microphones pushed toward my face before Darren had even left the demonstration floor. "Mr. Rourke, do you want Miranda Keane removed?" one shouted. "Do you want the partnership shut down?" another asked. "Do you believe Ford executives should face criminal charges?" The questions stacked up so fast they stopped sounding like words. Behind them, workers stood in hard silence, waiting to see what kind of man I would become now that the truth had finally turned its face toward us. I looked at Miranda. For the first time since I had met her, there was nothing polished left to hide behind. No clean blazer could soften what had just happened. No careful voice could make it corporate. Her company had let my father die blamed. Her event had stripped my daughter's name off a screen. Her people had cost me my job, almost my apartment, and nearly the one thing I had promised Helen I would protect. Mia's sense that the world could still be decent if you stood straight inside it. I thought about Frank sitting at our kitchen table with burned hands, unable to tell me why the neighborhood hated him. I thought about Mia's robot frozen in that gym while parents whispered like cruelty was a civic duty. I had the perfect sentence ready. I could have made Miranda feel as small as she had let my child feel. Instead, I put one hand on Mia's shoulder and spoke to the room, not the cameras. "Clear Frank Rourke's name," I said. "Put it where people can see it, not buried in a corrected file nobody reads. Compensate every injured worker and every family that carried the damage from that day. Reopen the safety records from that period. Give line workers real whistleblower protection with shutdown authority that cannot be overridden by production managers chasing numbers." The board behind Miranda started moving, whispering, trying to surround her with caution. I kept going. "And create scholarships for workers' children who lost opportunities because their families were blacklisted after 1998. Not charity, correction." Miranda did not look back at her board. She looked at Mia, then at the workers, then at me. "Agreed," she said. Her voice shook once, then steadied. "We chose production speed over human beings. We protected reputation over truth. That ends publicly, today." One executive reached for her arm, but she pulled away and told her assistant to put every word in writing before the demonstration floor cleared. A lawyer asked about damages. I said I would accept honest payment for lost work, legal harm, and what they put my daughter through. But I would not take hush money, and I would not take revenge money dressed up as justice. Mia leaned against me, quiet and solid.
That was when I understood the only victory worth keeping was the one that would not poison her.
Frank Rourke's name went back on the factory safety wall 3 weeks later. Not in a footnote, not in some corrected archive nobody would ever open. They put it where workers passed every morning, under the title, Line Safety Heroes, with a photograph my mother had kept in a shoebox and the words, Frank Rourke warned the line, attempted emergency shutdown, and carried workers to safety during the 1998 Press Bay incident. I stood there with Mia while a maintenance man screwed the brass plate into place. The sound of that drill echoed harder than I expected. My father had been dead for years, but when that last screw tightened, it felt like somebody finally let him stand up straight. The criminal complaints against me were dropped. My job record was cleared. The school district sent a public apology, the kind written by lawyers. But Mia's robotics committee did better. They put her name back on the scholarship list and apologized to her in front of the whole gym. She did not smile right away. She only nodded, because kids remember who clapped when they were hurt and who waited until it was safe. Miranda did what she promised, and then she did the harder thing. She made it permanent. The Independent Worker Safety Council was not a committee with donuts and no power. It had real shutdown authority, real outside oversight, and workers on every shift who could stop a line without asking permission from someone counting production numbers in an office. Injured workers from 1998 got corrected records and compensation letters. Families who had spent years thinking their pain was just bad luck finally saw the company admit what had been taken from them. Darren Pike faced investigation, and so did the people who had protected him. But I did not sit around celebrating that. I called Lou first. "Did your letter come?" I asked. He said yes, then went quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. When he spoke again, his voice sounded smaller. "Rose's name was in it too," he said. "They remembered what she lost." That mattered more to me than any headline. Mia went back to robotics slowly, the way you step onto ice after hearing it crack once. She rebuilt her machine, then started a new model on our kitchen table, a little press line setup with a bright red emergency stop button that actually cut power to the motor. She named it Frank. The first time she pressed the button and the wheels stopped clean, she looked at me and said, "That's how it should have worked." I said, "Yeah, baby. It is." Miranda started coming to the factory floor without cameras. At first, workers went stiff when they saw her. Then, little by little, they talked. They told her what fear sounds like when a line keeps moving too fast. They told her how men lower their voices when they need a paycheck more than they need to be right. She listened without defending herself, which was the first useful thing I ever saw her do. The day Mia received her scholarship certificate, Miranda came to us afterward and did not speak to me first. She knelt slightly so she was closer to Mia's height and said, "I should never have let your father be dragged away while your name was still on that screen." Mia studied her, then reached into her pocket and showed her the small robotics medal she still carried. "I'm keeping this one," she said. Miranda nodded like she understood she had not earned forgiveness, only a chance to do better next time. That night I took Frank's cracked watch and Mia's medal and placed them together in a small frame on our living room shelf. The watch hand still pointed to 3:14. For most of my life, I thought that meant the moment everything stopped. Now I know it was the moment my father started telling the truth. The watch was never really about time. It was about who gets believed before the damage is done.